What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Identity Jedi Show. Man, what do you think about that intro music? Tell me what you think. Drop some fire in the comments. Let me know what you think about that intro music. I personally like it. I really like it, even though it might be biased. I made it myself, but I like it. It's a nice little vibe. Gets you going. Hey, welcome back to the second episode of the Identity Jedi Show, fresh off of Gartner IAM in Vegas. Man, what a show! What a time! Look, anytime that you get to go to Vegas and hang out with cool people, it's going to be a good time, even though it was hot as you know what out there in Vegas. I don't want to curse because LinkedIn might then ban my show or something like that. But it was super hot. It was super humid. But look, it was a great week down there in Vegas. Lots of great conversations with everybody, right? Customers, with other vendors, with practitioners. We nerded out about identity for 3 straight days. Lots of good information coming from the analysts and people on stage. Everybody you can think of was there. It was super dope and much needed, I think, to kind of help us with this transition back to normalcy. Definitely the most fun that I've had in an identity conference in a long time. And it was exhausting. I'm not going to sit here and lie. It was exhausting, but it was fun to go hang out. It was fun to get to the happy hours, the dinners, and again, have these conversations. If you have never been to a Gartner IAM event, I would highly recommend you going. You don't have to be crazy like me and go to a bunch of them all the time, because that can be tiring. But seriously, just the depth of conversation that you can have around identity is great, because you get a chance to talk to people, both vendors, service providers, and then just other people like that maybe in your industry or even not in your industry, and hear how they're solving probably some of the same problems that you have, and just really getting a chance to geek out about it. So super cool, super fun. Glad to be back though. I am home, back to get this together. I put together a great show for you guys. I've been waiting to get this out. But because of Gartner and the time, and I couldn't get it out on the 25th, so I apologize. You are getting it today, the 29th. It's going down. Welcome, and let's get into it. Welcome to the Identity Jedi Show. So look, let's get into the news, because we have got a whole lot to talk about. It's been popping in the world of identity. We're going to get into it right now. Okay, so look, we got to address the big elephant monster in the room. First of all, Thoma Bravo, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it, but a PE firm has gone on a freaking spending spree. What we last saw was they had agreed to acquire SailPoint. I do believe that deal is now official, has been closed. That's something that we saw coming out of it the last time we were all together. But since then, they said, why stop there? Let's continue to go on this big, huge spending spree. And they also decided to buy Ping. Most recently, they announced that they will be acquiring Ping for $2.8 billion. First of all, clearly I am doing something wrong in my life, because I need to have just $10 billion hanging around so I can buy up identity companies. But it does bring up the question. It brings up the topic. We talked a lot about this at Gartner in a bunch of different conversations. What's happening here in the world of the identity industry? We've been seeing consolidation. We've been talking about it for the past couple of years, but this is some really big shots that we've seen. These are 2 huge names in the identity industry being taken out of the public sector and going back private by the same firm. So you start to kind of think, look, are we going to see a SailPing, a Ping Point, a new kind of company coming out to really build a true enterprise IDaaS platform? Look, this is what most of us are thinking about, and most of us are saying. I'll give you my personal take, right? Here's my personal prediction. Here we go. Mark the date, say it down. You can come back at me later if I'm not right. Look, I think they're doing what we all think they're doing. I think they are going to be trying to build a complete IDaaS platform out of these companies. What that looks like, I'm not quite sure. I think they will take bits and pieces from both and put it together. I think they're going to go with SailPoint's brand. I think that brand is bigger, maybe a little biased, but I think that's a bigger brand, and really kind of come out of this with a true stack. We've seen this in the identity industry before, where we wanted suites. We wanted one throat to choke. Customers like, I just want one person, give me everything. And we couldn't quite do it. We failed miserably at trying to create this stack. But we look at where we are today with cloud and the way we build applications, the technology that we have. It's possible from a technical standpoint. It's very possible to deliver this. From a business standpoint, this is a lot. That's a lot of money to take to spend and put into one company. How do you transition those companies who does what things go, all questions that I would not want to have to answer. But I do think that over the next 24 to, I'll give it like 30-ish months, we are going to see that be folded and come out of that. It just seems to make the most sense. But again, those guys smarter than me, have more money than me, so maybe they'll figure something else out. But my money, my bet is on we are going to be seeing a new conglomerated monster coming out of that to give you a full IDaaS stack. And look, this to me shows us that the IDaaS wars, as I will call them, is up and running, and the shots are being fired. The first shots were fired long ago. Okta came out and said they're going to hop into IGA, they're going to hop into PAM. CyberArk snatched up Idaptive. Now they're saying they're going to get into IGA. Everybody's quickly trying to become a platform. Now you have two of the biggest players in this industry being taken off market, so being taken off the public market. And I do think they're going to be put together and put back out. But we'll see. Who knows, right? All we can do is speculate. Doesn't hurt to speculate, so we will do that. I think that's where they're going to be going. And it's going to be interesting to see, because if that does happen, let's talk about what that could mean for the industry. As I've said, we've seen this before. Granted, it was early 2000s, when Oracle brought up every single identity company you could possibly think of. And so there just became this kind of barren wasteland of like, who's left? And at the time, everybody was trying to offer suites. And so these suites were just failing. They were big, they were huge, they were complicated. They didn't work. So everybody wanted to go and say, I want best of breed, right? So give me the best single sign-on product. Give me the best identity management product. Give me the best directory product. Best of breed. I'll go buy that individually, and then I'll work and try and put those together. And look, that worked, right? That allowed SailPoint to become who they are. That allowed Okta to come into the game and become who they are. CyberArk to come into the game and be who they are. All these name brands that we now know, it gave them the ability to go and say, we're going to master this one domain and do it better than anybody else. And so best of breed was the thing. Also, that came with that was the integration. We've got partners that came and said, look, we'll help you integrate all these things, because you're going to need to know how to put together a strategy. All these things have to work together. And as we were doing that, the market and industry kind of shifted. We started building applications differently. SaaS became a real thing. And since we started looking at this and saying, like, hey, there's got to be a better way to do this. Customers were tired of paying $2 million for this, $3 million for that, another $1 million for this, and then paying a service provider $5 million to implement it all for 5 years. Like, it just became a lot, right? Why can't we just have all of this together in a single subscription solution that I can then have managed for me? And we are at that time. I believe that it's going to happen in the next 24 to 30 months. We're going to see these platforms coming out. We're going to see these new generation suites come out and to serve the big enterprise. I think what's going to happen is in this small business to the medium business market, I think other acquisitions, other kind of partnerships are going to happen as people come together to serve the small medium market, right? To serve the companies who aren't SailPoint today, but they were what SailPoint was back in 2003, 2004. They're a really small company, but they've got room to grow. They don't need all the complexity, but they would like to have a platform. I think we'll see some other players kind of come together and provide that. Going to be very interesting times indeed in the world of identity when it comes to that. So look, let's had to get that out the way. We had to address that. That's the biggest news that's been going down since then. But we've got some other things that we need to get to as well. We've got, unfortunately, like this, we're never going to get past that, but we do have some breaches to talk about. And they're kind of identity related, but this was interesting. So Twilio hackers breached over 130 organizations during a months-long hacking spree. But when you go into this, right, this wasn't necessarily anything against Twilio specifically. It goes bigger than that. There was this group IB says the attack on Twilio was part of a wider campaign by the hacking group that it's called Octopus, a reference to how the hackers predominantly target organizations that use Okta as a single sign-on provider. Now, to be very clear, when you read this, what this was a very sophisticated phishing scheme. And what they would do is they would target, users of organizations who use Okta as a single sign-on provider. They would send them text messages saying, hey, something's happening, you need to go and change your password. Send them to a domain that included the Okta terms, but wasn't a valid domain. We all know from phishing, get into the domain, it's not the right domain. They put in the credentials. Now they have the credentials. They've got access. They can go back in and log in. This was an elaborate phishing scheme that this group applied to a lot of different companies. It wasn't just Twilio. And so sometimes, of course, always read the headline will grab you and think you go into one way, but it's good to dig into this. But this, again, kind of goes to something that I've been talking to my colleagues about and to different customers about for, I would say, at least a couple of years, is that once these hackers, these bad guys, as we want to call them, started figuring out that like identity systems were the keys to the kingdom, they would stop going after like the end applications, like the end user applications. Let's not go hack Twilio, right? Let's go get access into Okta. Let's go get access into CyberArk, right? This has been coming and for a while, because we talked about how identity is at the center of security and we want identity to be the new perimeter. Well, guess what? That puts these identity products right out there, right? Because as people start to realize that, hey, if I've got proper identity and access management controls, right? If I've implemented my IGA and got policies that are connected in with Okta, which is doing my single sign-on, and I've got that enforcement. If I'm automating my join, remove, reliever, if I'm implementing things like MFA, using context from identity to do strong authentication, right? It's going to be really hard to kind of get around. But also, if I can get access to those, which is what's driving and enforcing these policies and creating these accounts, I got what I need. Always want the keys to the castle. You always want the least amount of friction to when you're trying to get into something. So this is definitely something that perked up as I read this. I kind of went off on my radar, and I think it should for all of us in this industry, whether we're practitioners, whether we are vendor products, if we're developers for those products, right? We need to start thinking of ways to, one, inform our customers about this, right? And educate them about the security, the good security practice that you're putting around your application. At the end of the day, these are applications like anything else. We need to make sure we're saying this, we're following the same policies to strengthen these, so that way we can, be resistant to this. In this case, this was phishing, right? Phishing is one of the things that, this is straight, user security and education our users on how to see phishing attempts, or how to recognize them when they're there. And look, to be fair to those users, I mean, they're getting really sophisticated. I've seen some really, really good phishing attempts that made me think twice. I was like, whoa, that was really good. That was really impressive, right? But again, teaching them like how to look at text messages, look at the domains, look at emails, and really understand, like, is this something that's legitimate? And in all cases, like I would say this to everybody, if you don't know, pick up the phone and ask, right? Don't click on anything, respond. If you get something, if you get an email, if you get a text from your IT department and you don't recognize it, you don't know if it's valid, contact your IT department, send an email to your IT department, say, hey, I got this text, is this real? I got this email, is this real, right? Instead of assuming and clicking on the link and going forward, right? Because these, like I would say, these attempts are getting really good. They're not only are they, getting the domains that are close, but they're also getting the user interfaces of these products. So if you use it every day, when you're just kind of in autopilot, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is it, because you see the brand and you see the same thing. So things we need to look at and always be careful for. This is something we always talk about with our users. We got to do that education piece. And the last bit of news that I'm bringing today that I want to talk about, it kind of relates to what I started with the Thoma Bravo thing. Like I said, I do believe that this is going to create a landscape in which we're going to have a reset in the identity world, right? As organizations create these big, huge platforms, right? This gives runway for new companies to kind of step up and say, hey, what if we did this a different way? What are ways that I could do this right now? Right? This is a beautiful thing about tech and startups. If we said, look, if I give you today's technology and I say, go build me a user access review system using today's technology, what would you do? Right? We lean into machine learning, data mining, use that analytics to understand how we can make this easier and better, right? All this rich context that we lock within identity stores, how can we use that and make that available to other systems, right? And so, just like we saw back in the days when SailPoint first kind of came to rise, when all the suites were falling apart and everybody had realized that we couldn't build a nice comprehensive suite, there was this kind of lull, everybody went best of breed. I think this time in this industry, we're going to see a lull where people are like, hey, let's take advantage of this opportunity as people kind of figure out how to build this, and let's go start building modern technology of how we can answer these solutions, right? Because that's the thing, as businesses get bigger, right, it's just harder to innovate, right? And that's always this case. How do you stay innovative as you get bigger? So I do think we're going to see some up and comers come in, and two of them that I want to call out. One is Optimize. I love what these guys are doing. I'm going to pull them up here. This is me not quite being prepared, but it's cool. We'll have it ready. I want to here we go. Got them pulled up. Optimize. I love what these guys are doing from an aspect of really kind of breaking down when you look at user access reviews. This view right here, breaking down the applications and actually past the entitlement to understand what's truly the relationship of what this access means, right? And then doing highlighted suggestions and intelligence that help organizations figure out What do I really want to get rid of? What makes sense? What's not there? Because we've been in this process in this industry where we just inundate our users with data. Let's just give them all the data. Here you go. Here's everything they have. They don't know what that means, right? But to be able to show the relationships between those entitlements and what that is and what that really means, I think that's going to be powerful. And giving them suggestions of how they can, what needs to be removed, what looks like everything else in your organization. So be on the lookout for them. I think they're going to be somebody that we're going to see over the next, this next kind of lull, kind of step up and do some things. There's another one that's coming out that recently got some nice buzz, which is Vulcan ID, right? Bringing AI to identity governance and administration to take on SailPoint. Look, that's a big article, right, man? That's a big article right there, right? That is a headline for you, telling SailPoint, hey, we are coming for the IGA throne. A nice young startup, the way they're looking at it, being AI first when it comes to IGA, which is a good place to really think, where can I apply AI, right? Where can I use some data analytics, some mining to understand how to do governance and access reviews, right? Can I show you just the things that I think are the most riskiest and not show you everything else, right? So this is going to be interesting, right? An interesting TechCrunch article about this young company as they're coming up and the things they're trying to do. So I think we're going to continue to see more of these players step up over the next couple of years. And hey, it's going to be fun. Bring on the competition, right? Bring on the innovation so we can challenge and push each other to be better. Because at the end of the day, we want to deliver for our customers, the organizations that use this, because like, as we've seen, like these breaches are going to continue to happen, right? These things are going to continue to go forward. And we got to make sure, us on the vendor side, users on the practitioner side, that we're doing everything we can to put our organizations in the best place to succeed. So there you go. That is the news. Big news that it was. Man, it's been a crazy month. But let's get to the rest of the show. We've got an interview for you today. We got Mr. Alex coming on to talk about some cool things. So we're going to hit right into that. And then for the training today, we're going to be talking about, guess what? You named it, IGA. We're going to be diving into that. But for right now, let's get to the interview and let's talk to Mr. Alex. Here we go. Everybody, welcome to the Identity Jedi Show. Special guest today is Mr. Alex. I'm gonna make sure I pronounce this right. Is it Babeanu?
Sure, yeah, Babeanu. That works.
Babeanu? Okay. All right. I got close. I got close. So, of course, obviously, on the Identity Jedi Show, he's here to talk identity, and so we are ready to get into it. So, Alex, give everybody just a little bit about background about you, how you got into identity, and then we'll go from there.
Wow, cool. Identity. Been doing that for a while now. In the early 2000s, I was working for PeopleSoft as
Nice.
in their architecture team. We're building components for various of the other teams that are building on the HR side. Anyway, we decided to build an LDAP integration. That was 2001 or whatever. There was nothing much else out there, so we built that from scratch, and it worked working great. And I've been in identity ever since. With the Oracle acquisition, I built pieces of the Oracle Identity Manager for Oracle, part of their server tech team. So I've been doing that. And then I left Oracle and was on my own for a while as a consultant. Then I joined a consulting company called Nolly Identity Management. A great company, does a lot of quality work. So done that for about almost 10 years. But since last year, I've been moved again, and I'm the CTO of a startup called 3 Edges. We've built a no-code platform that generates API servers for graph databases. And the cool thing is that they're protected from out of the box. We have a cool authorization model. We also use authentication. And so all the identity pieces are all pre-canned in those API servers we generate. So that's been quite exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounds cool. So we're definitely going to get into that. So a little note there on your history, right? So I have you to blame for all the trouble I had with Oracle Identity Manager back in the day, right? So
really? I wish I had the same problems probably. Well, the pieces I worked on actually worked. I worked on the event. There's an event system in there. I mean, there used to be. I'm not sure nowadays. So that piece worked. But yeah, it's true. The Oracle stack is so many layers. It's just becoming a bit, yeah. Well, I'm not going to say much more than that.
I get it. I get it. You know what? I think for a lot of us, with more gray in the beard now than color, right? That was a time in the world of identity where I was actually really excited when Oracle had bought everything up. I was like, dude, this is going to be awesome. We could have like one really huge integrated stack. Like
Wow.
it was a developer's dream, right? And it just didn't. It just didn't quite pan out that way. And
No.
again, I think just ahead of its time, because you look at now where we're at, right? And with SaaS platforms, we're
Yeah.
moving back towards that. I think we're going to start seeing these kind of IDaaS platforms being built because customers are just like, hey, like it's nice to have everything all in one place. So the idea was good to have a nice integrated stack. It was just the execution. I just don't think the timing was right for it. So it'll be interesting over the next couple of years to see that. I know Okta, last year announced their whole IGA and PAM thing, and they're kind of moving towards that. We haven't really heard a lot about that since then, but it'll be interesting to see if the industry moves that way.
Well, it takes a while to build, and also Oracle acquires stuff, and integrating all this stuff together is where
Yeah,
the problem was. Anyway, uh, so yeah, the difference with the cloud stuff is you don't have to install stuff,
right.
which is great because installing an Oracle stack, if anybody who's done it, it could take a while.
A while. So yeah, man, I want to jump into what you're doing with your current company, because I'm starting to see a pattern with kind of authorization, right? And
Mhm.
this kind of applying it at the API layers and kind of getting into this dynamic authorization, rich text authorization, right? And so I'm hearing that from different places. I'm talking to different people. So it seems like a market's kind of brewing here in this area. So yeah, talk to us a little bit more about kind of what your product does and how that works and the importance of identity that's within that.
So first of all, why this product is well, everybody is actually a lot of people are moving to graph databases. All the data right now is still, I mean, most of the data is still stored in SQL or relational databases, but uh, 2, 3, 4 years from now, most of the data will be in graphs. And it's not me saying that; it's Gartner and other analysts.
Right.
The market is shifting that way, and you can actually see it. It's where if people are looking at making sense of their data and looking at a SQL database, it's really hard to make sense of the data.
Yeah.
You putting data in a graph makes a lot more sense. Even when I was doing identity as a consultant, we were looking at graphs for implementing complex access
Mhm.
policies, especially when we had some clients in the IoT world where you have hundreds of millions of digital identities and complex access rules because devices can talk to each other, can talk to web services, people and to people, and vice versa. Or in the B2B2C world where companies partner, and now you have a whole complex ecosystem of services and products that you need to secure. It's really hard to do that in traditional ways like SQL or even LDAP, which is only hierarchical. um, the relationships we had to deal with were not hierarchical at all, were any type of relationship
Right.
really. So the only way really to do this in the simplest way to do this, put it in a graph. And so we've been doing graph for identity and for access management for a while now. And this product that we've built, 3Edges, is a no-code platform that builds meant for graphs. So you draw a graph model and some configurations in a nice canvas. It's just drawing, and in a few minutes you can get a fully fledged API server that is usable right away, and it encapsulates authentication as well as authorization. And the authorization piece, we use our own we have some we use academic research for that. Like there's a lot of research going on in the graph sphere in academia about access management and security
Nice.
and what have you. So we use pathfinding and another bunch of other ways.
Yeah.
So that's been all of that is kind of pre-canned. We have a way to draw these policies graphically and apply them so that at runtime, whenever you try to access one of the APIs, we just enforce this out of the box kind of thing. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah. That is.
Quite excited. Yeah.
Yeah. It is very neat, right? And I think it's gonna, second question I will get to later was gonna be like, what are you excited about in the industry that's coming? But I think we already did that, right? So, yeah. So what are some of the the business cases and drivers that you see, like, for this technology, right? I think, one of the things in the identity industry that's always been that was a struggle early on for us in this industry was that it was a very technical thing, right? And the business
Hmm.
didn't get it, they didn't understand, right? We're past that now, right? When we got to the world of identity governance, the SailPoints of the world kind of took off, and
Yeah.
people understand, why how important this is, where we have Okta. So looking at this, again, like I said, I've been having a lot of conversations around authorization. What's the business value that you guys are seeing that this can provide?
Um, well, there are some complex. Again, the complexity is all about like when you have to deal with a lot of related. Identity is never alone. Like when you have an identity, if it's just sitting on its own, it's kind of useless. It has to relate. It's always related to a system it tries to access, or to an employer, or to something. So when you make those relationships actually first class citizens, is where you drive the value, because now you can go beyond traditional identity of just authenticating on and authorizing. But if you have those relationships in place, now you can do stuff like identity analytics or recommendations, or maybe do smart things like AI driven things. um, Another big driver, I mean, I think is going to be the Web 3.0. I know it's kind of a buzzword,
Yeah,
and I know in our sphere and in identity and access management, people are kind of skeptical about it.
right, right.
Yeah, it's not going to happen, science fiction, whatever. But it is actually happening.
Yeah,
It's a big market. A lot of players, as you probably know, are already doing it, and there's a lot of companies. It's a very vibrant ecosystem, and everything in that ecosystem is very graphy. When you do things like distributed identity and verifiable claims, a claim is essentially a cryptographically provable relationship between you and an issuer, which is kind of an interesting way to look at it.
right,
And in that world, all the traditional stuff we've been working on for so long, like OAuth, OpenID, and all these trusted third parties, everything goes out the door because everything's distributed. There's no central repo anymore. There's
right.
no trusted third party. So you don't use OAuth, you don't use OpenID Connect, you don't use any of that stuff. So it's a very different universe. And I think it has potential to really break havoc on our traditional way of thinking.
Yeah,
That I
absolutely.
think is the thing that's coming up that's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, no, look, I agree. I was, I said on the last show, for those viewers that are coming back, right? I started, um, I was one of the ones in identity that I started when I first started Web3, and even back then, like, blockchain and decentralized identity, I was like, yeah, whatever. Like, okay,
Yeah,
but as the as the technology matured, I guess I'll say, and the use cases started to show up, and I really
yeah,
started to see like, hey, this could be like hugely impactful to
yeah,
our industry, right? When you think about at the core of what we do, right? No matter what you're doing in identity, right? The core of it is I need to be able to take an identity digitally and know without a shadow of a doubt like who it is, right?
yeah,
What is this identity? And
yeah,
I need to be able to then take that to your point because an identity is useless if it doesn't connect to things like
exactly.
connect to stuff. And I'm like, this is the core. Like the decentralized identity is the core of like what we are trying to do. So I agree with you. I think the
Yeah,
onset of Web3 and this decentralized identity is going to really change how we look at things, how we can deliver systems, right? And now truly like what I'm hearing, I love the things about this is my comp sci degree coming back up, right? Looking at a graph and going through and finding connections within the graph, right? Searching graph trees. And so for all of those that took computer science, you had to do all these projects and learn how to do those searches, right? Those are efficient searches, right?
yeah,
Those searches that you can start to see past when things go down past. Now, to your point about recommendations and learning, right? You can see what are paths that are usually taken. What's the fastest path to get to a node?
yeah,
When you start to apply that thing to access, right? Think about it. It's like I can say, okay, look, here's the fastest way to get to this resource. So that tells me the recommended access that I should
yeah.
have. But I can also look at that path and say, what's the most traversed path through these
Hmm.
identities, right? Hmm,
Exactly.
this is my most used resource. Maybe like I should make sure that the access that I'm lining with this most traversed path is
Yeah,
most secure, right? So I think we're going to be able to get to this age of like questionable intelligence with our identity analytics, right? Like, what is this? What should I do with this? And we'll have
yeah.
to be able to answer it.
It's if you start connecting identity with your other systems as well. That's where it starts to be really interesting. Like you log in and you get access to, I don't know, a shopping cart app to buy stuff. But now if you connect that identity to the orders and to the products and whatever, then now it becomes really interesting from a, you know, from a marketing or business standpoint as well. Like identity should be part of the whole thing. Another interesting use case we've had in the past with a client was role mining. You put all your roles in the graph, and now you can do things like clustering and finding, as you said, the most traversed things, and you can optimize and maybe clean up a bit of your role explosion problem.
Right.
Right, stuff like that are quite interesting.
What are you talking, Alex? Nobody ever has a roll explosion problem, right? We always have just the right amount of rolls.
Seriously, who hasn't? Yeah, so it's really interesting. Like I think graphs have been kind of overlooked a little bit in our universe, and which is too bad. I mean, I spoke a lot about it, but the traction has not been there for some reason in our ecosystem, like in our universe, which is interesting. But I'm sure it will get there.
Yeah, I think it will. I think there's a growing, like I will say, the first time I saw somebody actually using it was a company that SailPoint actually ended up purchasing. It was Orcus. So that was like 2017, 2018-ish,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I remember seeing them at RSA, right? And they were building all their access models off of a graph database. And I was like, oh my God, finally, like somebody has
Yeah.
started to build this, right? And then SailPoint ends up acquiring stuff like that. So that's the first time I started to see companies thinking about it in that way. And since then, right, I've been seeing a little bit here, a little bit there. And I really think it's not shocking to me that it's tied to authorization most of the times, because this is where we see when you're trying to do those policies and trying to understand the true depth of what this access means and what it connects you to. Like to your point, it's graphs make the most sense. It's visual. You can just kind of see it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You can totally see it. Yeah, in the web, like jumping back again to the Web3, but again, there's gonna be some really interesting authorization scenarios using verifiable claims, like the claims and combination of claims, and then use that for driving access. Another driver for that universe will be user experience. From a user standpoint, it's going to be so much easier. You'll have a wallet, which most people already have on their phones, with a bunch of claims in them. No need for passwords, no need for second factor of anything. It's all cryptographically secure and in a hyperledger somewhere. So as strong as a crypto key, as far as I can tell.
Right.
And no more passwords. So it's awesome. I mean, it's a great experience. I mean, that's where I think that's one of the drivers. I think people will be like, oh, this is so easy. I can now share it with you, or I can revoke that easily with my phone or whatever.
Right. So there you go, folks. You heard it here first on Identity Jedi Show. Web3 means no more passwords, right?
Well, it's the hope, but obviously there'll be the integration with the more like a company will still have a payroll, so they'll have their own users in their LDAP or whatever. So they'll have the two worlds will kind of have to integrate for a long time still. So we're not out of a job yet.
Right, exactly. we haven't yet worked ourselves out of a job yet. We've been trying for a while now.
Yeah. So that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. So shifting focus just a little bit, if somebody's that's watching this or listening to this, depending on how they're consuming it, and they're like, look, this all sounds exciting. I've been following this. I really want to get into identity, right? So knowing everything that you know now, right? What would you tell somebody to say, okay, they're coming into identity right now. Here's where I would start. What would you tell them?
Okay, so I'm kind of interesting one. The way I started was I have somewhere the LDAP Bible written in late 90s.
I remember.
I read you remember that? I read that first because I had to integrate with it. Nowadays, I don't know. Interesting. Well, maybe that's the standards. Now we have to use OAuth, maybe. So look at OAuth and understand that flow, or well, I mean, depends on what you're trying to do, I guess. If it's just logging with something else, typically that's what it is. So starting with those flows, probably. I'm trying to think here. Yeah.
Yep.
That would be my take. That I've seen. I mean, yeah, most of the implementations of it is basically logging in.
Yeah, no. Look, I think it's a good place to start as well. It covers a lot. There's one thing that I tell people about identity, right? It's a big little space, right? So like most people don't know about it. When you talk to someone, it's like, oh, identity access management. Well, you got to tell part of cybersecurity, right? But then when you get into it, it's like it's so
Yeah,
broad. There's so many different things within identity access management you can do,
right.
even to the broader security field, right? How much they're aware of it. We're starting to see them become more aware of identity and access management. When you look at it, is because it's been core. Like everybody wants to, people talk about security, they get in, they want to do red teaming and blue teaming and all this stuff, whatever, and ethical hacking and all this stuff, whatever. And I'm like, that's
Hmm.
great. Not knocking
Yeah,
that. You can pen test, you can get into an application. That's cool. I was like, but when you're talking about enterprises, like when you get in, what's the first thing people are trying to do? They're trying to escalate to get the privileged
yeah,
accounts. They're trying to. I was like,
yeah,
it's like an identity and access controls are the
yeah,
ones preventing that from happening. I was like, so it's a big part of security, but it is a big field to get in there. So um,
yeah. It's
you
true.
know, yeah,
What I try to, it's really hard to describe what we do too. So when you talk to people, at a cocktail or whatever, it's, oh, what do you do? Okay, so I do work in security. Okay, it's kind of vague. But if they insist, you say it's what happens when you log in, which is sounds kind of boring and shuts down the conversation usually. But not sure how else to describe it. Really, it's kind of
yeah,
yeah, it's kind of making sure you have access to the stuff you're supposed to.
right. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why for so long this field was kind of overlooked, because when we say it's
Hmm.
like that is a perfect example. We take care of what happens when you log in, and people are like, okay, well, I log in, and then the screen pops up, right? And it's like, yeah, but in that 2 milliseconds, right? The
Yeah,
amount of things that happen to allow you to do that, right, is a big, complicated kind of world beneath that, right? So
yeah,
I think that's what I loved about identity, is that it was all these complexities and all these things we can do, but like to the end user, it's mostly invisible, right? And
yeah.
you're doing it right when the user could do things faster. My first deployment in identity, we deployed a provisioning project. It was using Sun IDM way back in the day, right?
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah. So currently, before we implemented the product, it took 2.5 weeks for somebody to get their 80 accounts provisioned to get.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. And so we went from 2.5 weeks to like 15 minutes. The
yeah,
moment like they onboarded, we saw them in the system, we set everything up. They had their account, they had all the roles, things like that. And the admins at the time were just like, "This is incredible! Like you just took off like 80% of our tickets and our help desk." They started to kind
yeah,
of get mad at us, like, "Are you
yeah,
guys getting?" But it was like, no, we freed up more things for you guys to do. Like you guys now don't have to worry about onboarding accounts. This just automatically gets done. And so that's kind of what I've always loved about identity, right? To me, that was like the microcosm of this industry. There's all these complex things that we do and set up in the background to make it easier for users just to kind of do their jobs and
yeah.
make it quicker.
A very fascinating aspect of provisioning actually and identity also is integration. It's all about integrating
Mm-hmm.
various systems. So you have all these protocols and all of that, but as you said, like a provisioning tool, it's all about integrating with all these various different systems. So you have adapters, connectors, and APIs and whatnot you have to do. I remember implementing a provisioning solution at a municipality here in the Greater Vancouver area where I live. Once done, they were like, "Oh my God, this is too fast. Our system cannot keep up. Like they're getting, so we have to work on our own back office." It was just they were getting the events way too fast.
Right.
That's kind of funny. Whereas before, as you said, it would taking them like weeks or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So it was like basically sub-second afterward. On like it was very interesting.
Yeah. Well, great field to be in. Well, Alex, man, that's the time that we have today, man. I appreciate you coming
Cool.
on, being on
Well,
the
thanks.
Identity Show.
Thanks for doing this. Thanks for having me and doing the show. That's great.
Yeah, no. Look, I want to give more, want to give more credence to this field of identity access management. I've loved it. I've been in it now 20 years. I want more people to
Yeah.
know about it. Be excited about coming into it. So before we sign off, one more time, just let everybody know about your company, where they can find out more information about it, because it sounds like really cool technology. So I want to make sure that people get a chance to hear about
Thanks.
it.
Yeah, it's called Three Edges, threeedges.com, like number three and then edges.com. Comes from the edges and vertices you have in a graph. And if you're thinking about moving to the graph, you can get there really, really fast with Three Edges, like seriously in minutes, as opposed to probably months. I'm not kidding.
Well, there you go. So we that's what you get on the Identity Jedi Show, folks. You learn about identity, and you can find out about cool tools and products that'll help you do things faster. So totally
Cool.
cool. Thanks again, Alex.
Thanks a bunch.
We'll talk to
And
you
have
later.
a good one.
Yep.
Take care.
Awesome, man. Hey, look, thanks. Shout out to Alex for taking the time and hanging out with me, nerding out on some stuff. Really cool. Threeedges.com. Please make sure to check that out if you've got some interest. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about that, right? I really like the thing with graph databases because I'm really about relationships, right? Being able to see the relationships between entitlements and actions. I think that's going to be a huge thing for identity going forward. So threeedges.com, check it out. Now, favorite time. Let's get into training because it's talking about IGA. Let's do it. And look, I'm going to tell you, like when I recorded this, I meant to do it in another 10 minutes. It didn't happen. I'll talk a little bit about it in there. But look, let's get to the training. IGA time. Here we go. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Identity Jedi Training. And today we are diving into my favorite topic, identity governance, mostly because this is what I know. And this is what I came up with when I got into the world of identity. At the time, it wasn't called identity governance, but it grew into that. And this is where I made my claim to fame in doing these projects. I love them because they could be big, they could be complicated, but they can really be fun because there's a lot of interesting solutions that you can come up with and a lot of hard problems to tackle. So we're going to get into it. First, we're going to talk about and define what identity governance is, give you some tips and tricks. And we're going to keep this under 10 minutes. Look, there's a lot to cover here. I want to give you guys just a primer and some good tips and tricks. And then we can always come back and revisit and go into details, but just something really quick for those coming into the space that really want to understand it, or maybe been in an adjacent space, kind of understand what IGA really is. So let's dig into it. Here we go. All right. Here's the first thing. You look at identity governance and it really tries to answer the question, who has access to what? Kind of. Here's the reason why I say that, right? You talk about anything in identity and everybody tells you they're trying to manage who has access to what. It's one of the problems that we have here in the identity industry is that we kind of use a lot of the same vocabulary and a lot of the same language over and over again. So it's hard to figure out who really is doing what. But essentially at its core, what identity governance and administration is doing is managing the entire process around creating your digital accounts with the organization and truly governing and managing who has access to what, how they got that access, and making sure that they're getting the right access based on the policies or the needs of your organization. Now, what IGA doesn't do is they're not only enforcement side of it, right? They're not enforcing who had that access. But if you think about it from a process standpoint, I'm going to create your account. I'm going to have a standard of how I create your account. I'm going to have certain entitlements of things that I give you. I'm going to have policies that drive what entitlements you can have. Therefore, that's what I'm going to push and create into the account. So in theory, if I've got IGA in place and I'm following the process, your account should never have things that are against policy. That's in theory. We all know we don't live in the world of theory. When I was looking at this, I said, look, let's go find the definition of what identity and access management is. And I'm going to move myself over here so you can see this full list. And here's the freaking interesting thing about that. It was really hard trying to just find a neutral definition of what identity governance and administration is. I hit up some of the ID Pro buddies that I have of their Slack channel. We're going to talk about it. So this might end up in Heather from ID Pro sent me a Slack message saying, hey, you should probably write the definition in an article about it. I noticed we didn't want to have one in the body of knowledge. Before she even does that preempting, I got you, Heather. I'll reach out to you. Let's talk about that. But when I went and looked at it, I found a bunch of marketing stuff. And look, like I was shocked and surprised at how much stuff that just didn't give a raw definition. I found like identity governance and administration is this, and here's how this product helps you do this. And I'm like, man, a lot of marketing fluff around there. And I just wanted a really raw definition. I did find this definition from Gartner. However, again, it was gated behind a document that you need to have a membership to log into. But here's the basic information, right? So IGA tools manage digital identity and access rights across multiple systems. To accomplish this, IGA tools aggregate and correlate disparate identity and access rights data that is distributed throughout the IT landscape to enhance control over user access. This aggregated data serves as the basis for core IGA functions, including identity lifecycle management, entitlement management, access requests,
workflow orchestration, on and on. I look at this and I'm like, huh? Like I work in this industry and I'm looking at this. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get that. But if this is somebody was coming and saying, hey, tell me what IGA is, and you listed on that, I really don't think they would know what you're talking about. So that's Gartner's definition, good definition. I came up with my own, right? Let's break it down. It comes down to this. It's the lifecycle management of digital identities, right? And lifecycle management, what you mean is that joiner, mover, leaver. If you've ever heard those terms before, it's when you're joining an organization. When you first started your new job, we call that a joiner. You're joining the organization. There's a whole lot of things that need to be done. We got to create your accounts. We got to get your email account. We got to get your application accounts, whatever you need access to, right? That process historically has been really hard trying to figure out all the accounts, right? So the management of that lifecycle of who creates that digital identity. Mover, when you change positions within your organization, you came in as the marketing person, now you're the head of sales. Look at you. Congratulations. You're rising to the next great chief revenue officer that we'll ever see in this industry. But when you do that, the access and things you're going to have is change. You're not going to need the same access you had as a marketer. You're going to need new access as a sales leader. And then leaver, finally, you're leaving the organization. You've retired. You've done everything that you want to do. You're just like, hey, you took the company IPO. You're about to go live your best life. And now it's time to deprovision and take away that access. So that's when I say life cycle, that's what I mean. The full life cycle of those digital identities. IGA takes care of it, helps you automate and put processes around that. And that also includes things like access requests, provisioning, role management, right? So when you have to go in and you're working within this organization, you need to request for access to new things, you're going to need a place to go and request that access. Provisioning, that's the creation, the automation of creating those accounts in the back end. So you're not just in the help desk ticket anymore and somebody has to go type in stuff. No, we can automate all that now. So an IGA tool has that provisioning aspect. And then role management, right? This is a way to group up the access and make sure that we are creating a compliance structure around who has what access. The second major thing, I would say certification, and this is called user access reviews. So now that we've managed that full life cycle, we got you coming in, we're creating all these different accounts and giving you access. We need to review and make sure that you still have the right access. A lot of these things that happen in theory, this is best case, but in reality, when we're working, things change. We might get assigned to a project. We might be working with another team and we might need access temporarily or for a couple of months or however we need it. So we want to make sure that we're reviewing who has access to what. This comes out back to the history of identity access management. We'll get into that in other trainings, but it comes out of separation of duties and compliance, SOX, right? These kind of policies that came down after we had some very interesting organizations do some very funny things with numbers that they shouldn't be able to do. We kind of instead of say, hey, we need to make sure that organizations are having some kind of policies around how access is divvied up. And so user access reviews gives us a chance to go and say, let's look at the access that you have. Does this user need to have this access? Is it appropriate? Is it right? Also in user access reviews, you can start to look at privilege accounts that users may have, right? Do they have a lot of admin access? Do they still need that access? These are the type of things that you want to see in an IGA system for review. And then finally, compliance, policy creation, and enforcement during the life cycle. So you want to have policies that say, look, when I go and create this new account, if you're a developer and you're going into the engineering org, you probably shouldn't have the same rights as somebody in HR who cuts payroll checks. Let's not do that. So you can create these kind of policies and enforce them doing the automation of the join and mover leaver process or even access requests. So when you're going to if I'm a developer, I go to request access for something, I wouldn't be approved. The system would stop and say, no, you can't have access to the payroll system. In hindsight, a nice IGA access request system, it wouldn't even show up because that's not something that you'd have privy to. You'd have to go through an exception process to go and get that. So those three things is when I think of IGA is really what it does. And if you break the two words down, identity governance. So that's governing the process of the life cycle, right? So we're automating things, we're provisioning, we're making sure that we're pulling policies around what you're getting access to. And then the general administration, I can make changes to accounts. I can, assign you different entitlements, things of that nature. So when you put those two together, you've got identity governance and administration. So I think it's a fairly better, okay, not better, maybe just simpler. Look, at the end of the day, what this is about is that you want a system that's going to help you maintain all these different accounts and access to those accounts. So you can start to answer the question, who has access to? What I like to tell people is your IGA system would tell you who should have access to certain things. And to an extent, it will tell you who currently has been assigned that access because IGA systems connect out to all of your different applications and they can see and pull in what access they have. But what the difference between enforcing that on a day-to-day, when I go to log in, if I know the administrator, the AD administrator, and he's a buddy of mine and I want him to give me certain group access, they could still go in and give that group access. So IGA doesn't stop in that enforcement on that side, but it does show you from a creation of the account, from an update of the account and deletion of the account, it's going to be in a compliant manner based on the policies you've put in IGA. So in general, it does start you down the path of answering the question, who should have access to what? That's the better thing I'll say. For IGA systems will tell you who should have access to what. Okay. Now, what problems does it solve? I'm going to get this IGA solution. What does it help me? What is it doing? Number one, like I talked about, automate the JML in a compliant manner. JML stands for joiner, mover, lever. If you don't remember anything else from this training, remember joiner, mover, lever. IGA helps you automate that process and make sure that you're not wasting a whole lot of time on things that can be automated, and that you're creating the accounts in a compliant manner. The cool thing about this is when you walk through that process and say, hey, you've got a new person coming on, they're joining, you talk to HR, you understand how they onboard them, you can get a feed from HR and say, okay, we got a new employee coming in. Now, based on that, you can start to say, all right, we got a new employee with the vision that they're going to be and what they're going to be doing. Let's create them some basic accounts that they need. And you can start as simple as we know they're going to need an email account. So let's just provision them their email account. But you can start to, as you mature, do more than that. You can give them an email account based on their role in their department, give them other applications that people in that role or department might have access to, and you can create the accounts in a standard manner. So that way, one account's not get created with admin rights, another one's getting created with just dev rights. You can automate this to create the templates for how you create those accounts, right? So every time you join somebody, they get an account created with the same entitlements that they're supposed to have. And that's the same for mover if you're moving between organizations, and lever, which lever I would say is probably the most important one here, because lever makes sure that when somebody leaves the organization, you are removing that access the day they leave that organization. This is one of the big things in the identity industry we've always seen, because one of the entryways for a lot of third-party breaches or breaches in general is that they'll get access to an account that's just been left abandoned for however long. It used to be really bad. We used to have accounts sitting there for years before we caught them. Identity has been growing as an industry. And so now maybe it's not that bad, but we probably still see some organizations where it's weeks, depending on their process, where that account is still sitting there. The person hasn't been there, but that account is still active. And so hackers love to get into that, right? Because that's the account that's, hey, it's still got privileges. Yeah, I can still move around and do things. And nobody's really checking or logging into this account every day because they are no longer there. So with the lever process, it does help you automate that. So the day that you let go of a user, they're leaving, they're retiring, whatever it is, you can remove their access. Number two, the next thing is visibility into who has access to what. Again, it's a kind of, right? Visibility and telling you who should have access to what. But once you have your IGA system, you can connect to your different applications. You can pull in the accounts, you can pull in the entitlements, and you can see what it is that your users have access to. And then you can start building this kind of profile of these roles and who should have that access. And at any given time, you're connecting to these different applications and what we call aggregation in the IGA world. So you're pulling in the accounts, checking the entitlements, you're making sure that, hey, is this still accurate? The last time I talked to AD at 9 o'clock in the morning, I got all back my AD accounts and their memberships. Let me check again at 5 p.m. Is that the same? Has anything changed? So to give you that visibility into what accounts that I have, what accounts are tied to the different people in my organization, what access do they have, what memberships are they in, what permissions do they have on this application. Visibility is key. It was really big early in the days of IGA because we didn't have any systems that did that. Most of the stuff was being tracked by spreadsheets or in like Lotus Notes databases. It was formal. We had really no visibility into that. That's one of the main things you get with IGA is that visibility into understanding what's your account landscape. Moving on to eases administration burden of compliance audits. Look, when you have that auditor come in and knock down your door, you don't want to be going around grabbing spreadsheets and trying to figure out who has access to what. You want a tool that can go in and say, yep, I can show you everybody in this department. Here's what they currently have access to. Matter of fact, you can go into a user access review and say, hey, we reviewed all this access just 30 days ago, and it's been signed off that this is access that somebody is supposed to have. And so you can present that for your auditors to help with that. And finally, done right, it reduces privilege creep. What tends to happen over time is that, let's say you're an organization that's been around for 30 years. Let's go a little bit. Let's say 10 years. And you've got a girl who started day one. She was your first developer. She's been a rock star over the last 10 years. She's probably not going to have the same access she has on day one that she has on day 10. She's probably gained a whole bunch of access over time and things of that nature. When you have an IGA system in place, again, it's managing that mover aspect of it. Like you would have seen the access that she had, you would have been managing that, and you could reduce the privilege creep that tends to happen in organizations such as that. So, quote from the Identity Jedi himself, IGA isn't a sprint, it's an ultra marathon. Literally is. You're constantly going, you got to bike, you got to hike, you got to swim, you got to do all this stuff. All jokes aside, it is something that you want to look at and say that this is a process. These are things that you're going to change over time as you introduce into your organization. And let's dive into that. Okay. And already I've lied to you. We're at 14 minutes. I said it was under 10. Sorry, I lied. We'll be okay. But I wanted to make sure you got the good information, guys. Where do you start? If you're looking at IGA, if you've never done it before, or your organization's currently looking at it, where do you start? You're looking at how do I go about doing IGA? So I'm gonna give you these 3 tips. Number 1, define your objective. You got to know, have a clear goal of what you're trying to accomplish. Do you want to reduce time to onboarding accounts? Do you want to reduce time to terminate accounts or active? Yes. Okay. Do you just want to pass the next audit? Whatever it is you're looking at this, do not boil the ocean in the world of cliches that we live in. Don't look at this and go, we're gonna handle everything. We're gonna manage every single account, or we're gonna put in roles, we're gonna do all this process. Look, I applaud you. Yes, that's the right way to think, but you're not going to get all that done in one project. You're going to have to baby step that. So define some very clear objectives to what you're looking to do before you start down your RGA journey. Next, number 2, executive buy-in. Got to make sure you have executive buy-in on this. I have seen it time and time again. This is where IGA projects early on failed miserably all the time because they had no executive buy-in. And even today, still struggle. If your executives don't understand the need for your IGA project and how that ties to the business need and the business objectives you're trying to meet, it's going to be very hard to get this done. And here's why. IGA products are not just technical projects. They involve every aspect of the business. You're going to have to talk to HR. You're going to have to talk to managers. You're going to have to talk to application owners. You're going to need to understand how they interact with all these things. And then you are going to just define the process that connect all those together and automate it, and then deliver results to those users. Every single user is going to have a different expectation of what they want, right? So sometimes that means compromise in business process change. You might need HR to change some things about how they process the data, right? You coming yourself as a project leader or a director may say, hey, HR, did you change this? It's a little different if you ask versus when the CISO comes and asks and says, hey, we need some changes to happen. So you do need some of that top-down leadership, a buy-in to help you push through some doors that you're going to have to go through. Finally, process. Know what your process is, and then refine your process, and then implement your process. We have this saying in tech, right? Garbage in, garbage out. If your processes are shitty now, when you go into IGA, they're not going to get any better if you don't spend the time to refine them. Understand what your process is. We'll take onboarding. When you onboard a user, what happens? What accounts do you create? Who needs to approve? Who needs to approve those accounts? Why are those accounts created? Go through that process and understand it. Ask questions, and then see if you could refine that process. What you want to do is go from end result to end result. User starts, they need an account, right? What happens in the middle sometimes is all kind of crazy stuff that's just been processed that is built over time that aren't necessarily the right thing to do. You can just say, hey, look, at the end of the day, I want to onboard a user and I want them to have their accounts and be able to log in on day one. So what's the clear path that I can go to get that? What's the shortest distance between those straight lines? That's your chance to refine that process. Believe me, trust me, if you do this work ahead of time, it will make your IG implementation that much easier, that much faster, because you will not be trying to re-implement all of these kind of crazy processes and older processes that you currently have. So know that. And that's it. Look, boom. I lied to you. I'm sorry. Good luck if you're going up. We're at 17 minutes. I said it was another 10 minutes. I'll just change it later on the next time I do this. So you got it in just under 20 minutes. But there's a lot of information here around IGA. Look, at the end of it, here's what I want you to take away from this. IGA is governing and administering your accounts within your organization, the life cycle, creating those accounts, joining a reliever, getting a process around that. Certification, right? Being able to certify this user has this access. I know they have this access. And then compliance, making sure that I'm saying it and doing this in a compliant manner. Excuse me. That's what I want you to think of IGA. You're going to need executive buy-in. You want to look at your process, make sure you have defined clear objectives. And there you go. Boom. Not under 10 minutes, but it was under 20. We'll see you next time on Identity Jedi Show.
You see this ad right here. This could be yours. Your time to talk about your service, your product, your place in the identity industry. So, what are you waiting for? Reach out to us at info@onthecorner.us to find out more.
Boom, there you go. So, like I said, it wasn't quite 10 minutes. It went a little bit longer. Okay, it was like double that. My bad. I'll get better. But look, that's it. That is the show. I appreciate all of you so much. Show me some love in the comments. Let me know what's going on. Got news updates for you. We have got a newsletter coming. So I will be dropping the links. Be sure to follow me on LinkedIn to see the links, but also you can email me at david@onthecorner.us. I'll be sending you information about the newsletter if you want to go ahead and sign up for that. The newsletter will be weekly. It'll be coming out so you get your weekly dose of the Identity Jedi. You don't have to wait so long for a month before you can get the information, but I'll be bringing the latest news and updates straight to your inbox, specifically for you, because this is what we do. This is what I'm here for you. I'm here for the people. I'm here to do this. So thank you so much for tuning in today. Drop comments. I want to hear what you think. If you've got news, if you got updates, if you have topics, holla at your boy David at onthecorner.us. Drop them in the comments. Let me know what you want to talk about. If you're out there, you're like, hey, I've got a great product. I want to come on. I want to talk about what we can do. Hey, again, David at onthecorner.us. Let's talk about it. You want to sponsor the show and come on. Would love to have you. Just let you know, we're going to keep it real. We're going to keep it real. So if you want to sponsor the show and you come on and, your product a little, you know what I mean? We just say, because we're going to keep it real here. We want real information for the people. We want to make sure that people understand and they're coming into this or looking at this, that they get the things that they need. So until the next show, we are signing off. You guys be safe. Have a great week. Be good to each other. Be nice to each other. Love each other. We'll see y'all on the flip side. It's the Identity Jedi signing off. Y'all know what it is. I'm out.